the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Khalistani separatist and a terrorist. Yesterday, he qualified what he said back in September of 2023 by saying that at that time, there was no hard evidentiary proof. It was just intel or intelligence. But at the time, the exact phrase that was used by Mr. Trudeau when he stood in Parliament in September of 2023 was there were credible allegations of links between Indian government agents and the death of a Canadian national named Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Now, the question that needs to be asked is, when did credible allegations, the phrase that Mr. Trudeau used first on the floor of the Canadian Parliament, when did that become just intel? Why did he have to qualify in his testimony yesterday before the Foreign Election Interference Commission that it was not hard evidentiary proof, it was just intel? And in this year gone by, or year and a little over a year, where is the proof that Indian agents were involved in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar? In fact, shouldn't this be produced in a court of law by now? Shouldn't this have already been produced in a court of law by now? There are 4 individuals who have been arrested in the month of May for the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. They are awaiting trial. There have been 5 adjournments in this case. 4 of those adjournments have been sought for by the prosecution service because they have to still go through the process of document collection and evidence collection. So if they have not made this evidence public in a court of law, a year and plus since the killing of Hardeep Nijjar and a year and plus since Mr. Trudeau stood up in Parliament and said there were credible allegations, then where is the proof? First the story, and then we'll go across to our guests.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
At that point, it was primarily intelligence, not hard evidentiary proof. So we said, well, let's work together and look into your security services and maybe we can get that done. No, we're not doing that.
There is a pattern. The pattern is motivated by political considerations on the part of the Canadian Trudeau government. There is a clear pattern to smear India.
ਕਿਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਿਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹ ਖਰਾਬ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ। ਸਾਡੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਰਿਸ਼ਤਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਧਾਰੇ। ਸਾਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਰੋਜ਼ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਹੁਣ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ।
कनाडा को चाहिए कि वो जो भी आतंकवादी उनके यहाँ पनाह लिए हुए हैं उनको वो भारत को सुपुर्द करें ताकि भारत के कानून के अनुसार उनके साथ यथोचित कार्रवाई की जा सके।
All right, let's open this up to our guest. Michael Kugelman is director with the South Asia Institute of the Woodrow Wilson Centre. Vivek Kaju, former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. Anish Farooqi is a Canadian journalist. R.P. Singh is spokesperson of the BJP. Mr. Singh, let me start with you. The Canadian government's contention is, and this is what the Canadian Prime Minister said, that at the time that he made the statement, it was intel, it was not hard evidentiary proof, and the onus was on the government of India to act on that intel and discover the evidence of quote-unquote potential links between Indian government agents and the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Well, anyone can say that I have intelligence, intel with us. And I can say today, I can claim today that I have intel today that Justin Trudeau is doing it on behalf of certain terrorist organizations because they'll fund them in the elections. Where is the evidence? Your allegations, intel doesn't serve as evidence. So you need to come with a hard, concrete evidence. And this is known in the Canadian circle that he is catering to a particular vote bank because the Jagmeet Singh group has withdrawn support from him. And now he need to target that vote bank, not because of vote bank. They are hardly 2% as a vote bank, but because of the huge money they fund in elections. So, and it's known to everyone in Canada, known to any businessman or any corporate or any media house in Canada. But fact is that what are they trying to do? They are trying to keep snakes at their backyard. I remember Hillary Clinton saying to Pakistan that if you have snakes in your backyard, ultimately they're going to come and bite you. It's not Justin Trudeau. He is there today. He might not be there after next election. It is the Canadians who will suffer because of this terrorist. Because already there are gangsters operating from that their land.
Okay.
They're already blackmailing. They're already extorting money from the businessman there in Canada also.
So let me ask Anish Faruqi, on the 18th of September 2023, when Prime Minister Trudeau stood up in the Canadian Parliament, he said, and I quote, "There are credible allegations of potential links between Government of India officials and the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Canadian national on Canadian soil." Yesterday, while deposing before the Foreign Election Interference Commission, he said it was primarily intelligence, not hard evidentiary proof. That seems like a climb down. Why did he go from credible allegations to not hard evidentiary proof?
Well, to the surprise of all the Canadians, yes, indeed, it is a change in his stance of Mr. Trudeau. However, it does not change the fact, as my friend Mr. Singh said, that anyone can stand and start blaming. It's a matter of two states, two close states like India and Canada have good relationship, trade and bilateral cooperation. So I don't think someone, it's just anyone. It is the Prime Minister of Canada. It's the head of a state giving a statement of allegation based on certain intel or some evidences that were provided to him by these the CSIS and the RCMP, and the investigation is still open and it's still going on. So we still have to see, as you said, the hard evidence. Yes, we are interested to see that. Even the opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, wants to see that, and he wants access to that information. So in a way, I agree with you, but then you know what? There is something. It's not that there's nothing happened. It did happen. There was a murder happened on the soil of Canada of Harpreet Singh Nijjar. He may be wanted in India, but he is a citizen of Canada, and Canada will protect all its citizens regardless of their ethnicity.
No, but Mr. Faruqi, nobody has a problem with that. The problem is the Prime Minister of a country very rarely stands up in a parliament and accuses a fellow country, a friend, a partner, and more importantly, a fellow democracy, and said credible allegations of links of Indian agents in the murder of a Canadian national. And then for the last year plus, he made this allegation in September of 2023. For the last 1 year, India has been asking him both privately and publicly, show us the evidence. And he has not shown the evidence. And including, and in his own words yesterday, it was not evidence, it was primarily intel. Why should India, or for that matter, any non-partisan observer who's watching this India-Canada saga over the last year, take the words of the Canadian Prime Minister seriously?
No, I agree. It's a big question mark. But again, as I said, like when Justin Trudeau met Modi Saab in the summit, he did mention that we do have these links. Would you be cooperating with us so we can jointly investigate these things? And there was no cooperation from Indian side, so that raises up many eyebrows. That why?
Okay, let's take that at face value, right? Let's take that at face value, assuming that what Mr. Trudeau said is right, that he met the Prime Minister last Friday in Laos, and he said, this is what we have on you, and assuming that the Prime Minister was right when he said the Indian side is not cooperating, go ahead, make it public, let the world know.
Yeah, but again, like why is India not cooperating? Like that is another big question mark for Canadians, right?
My point is that's one person's word against another. Let's test it out. Let's put it out in the public domain and say this is the evidence that we have. Why is the Canadian government not doing that?
You see, it is really unprecedented that the High Commissioner and their 6 officials were expelled from Canada. It is like it never happened. It's not an easy thing to do for any state.
Because the Canadian police wanted to make them persons of interest in an ongoing murder investigation and wanted the government of India to waive off their diplomatic immunity. No government would do that. Let me ask Vivek Kaju. He's been a career diplomat. If the Indian government had approached the Canadian government and said that, look, there are 6 of your diplomats here who we want to add in an FIR as suspects in a murder investigation, police waive off their diplomatic immunity. What do you think the government of Canada would have said or done, Mr. Gaju?
Well, that the Canadians asking us to waive diplomatic immunity of 6 diplomats, including the High Commissioner, was simply propaganda. In fact, in his evidence before this Foreign Interference Committee, Trudeau himself said that if the Canadians were asked to do this, they would not do it. So this was a stupid thing. But Zaka, allow me to make a couple of points. The first point is that there is a fundamental difference between intelligence and evidence that can be produced and will stand up in a court of law. Now, what the Canadians asked us to do was something quite unprecedented. And Trudeau said this today, that he asked us to be given access to our intelligence agency so that there could be some kind of a joint investigation carried out. No country would do this. Will Canada allow its intelligence agency to be opened up to scrutiny by another country? Of course not. Second, and this is the important thing, that Canada has raised this matter to a political level by naming a senior minister of the government as being involved in this. Now, this is something that is never done. And Canada knows that this is wrong because ministers of the government and indeed of other countries don't involve themselves in operational matters. So from an intelligence and diplomatic level spat, this has been taken to the political level. Okay. And once these spats, allow me just one moment, when these are taken to that level, it becomes extremely difficult to resolve. Finally, you mentioned in your opening remarks that there is 4 Indians have been arrested in the matters relating to Niger, and we'll have, at some stage, the Canadian prosecutors will have to take the matter to court and prosecute these people by charge sheeting them, producing evidence, etc. At that stage, we will come to a bridge that we will have to cross. If there is something valid, if the Canadian legal courts say that yes, there is something that these 4 gentlemen, 4 persons who've been indicted and charge sheeted have to answer.
Okay.
That stage still hasn't reached. So till now, we are absolutely right in saying that that Trudeau has jumped the gun. Trudeau has asked for things that are simply wrong. And as for the 5 eyes, they are allies. They will stand with the Canadians no matter what. And lastly, there is a fundamental distinction between the American case involving Pannun and the Niger case. Because in the Pannun case, the matter has moved to the courts.
Correct.
Here there's nothing in the courts.
Nothing has come out in the courts. Let me ask Michael Kugelman, the distinction between the US case and the Canadian case. Of course, in the US case, it was a threat to the life of an individual, whereas in the Canadian case, that threat came good. But Michael Kugelman, the concern here in India is Justin Trudeau clearly could not have taken such a drastic step to start with in September of last year, and then, of course, yesterday what he said before the Election Interference Commission, to publicly attack an elected government of a fellow democracy unless he got a sign-off of some form from the United States. We know that the initial intel, and this was come out subsequently in reporting, was provided by one of the Five Eyes allies. It's easy to guess which one that is. Even the RCMP, when they had their press conference earlier this week, they said, yes, the FBI is helping us in the investigation. So the question is, if this is being done with the support of the US government, the White House, the State Department, why are they doing this to a strategic partner? Why is this happening publicly to a country which avowedly is, your answer, your counterweight to China?
Well, a few things here, Zaka. First of all, from a U.S. perspective, India is a strategic partner. Canada is a close ally. And that means that the U.S. is absolutely going to back its Canadian ally in terms of what it does. I'm not sure that the US actually had talked to the Canadian government about when Trudeau would come out with the allegation that he did last year, or even if he should. But clearly the US is going to be working with and expressing solidarity with its closest allies, including Canada. And I would actually argue that the US has kept in mind, despite that, its strategic partnership with India by proceeding very differently than Canada has in terms of how it's engaged with India regarding its own very serious allegations at its level against Canada. As you know, there's been a significant difference. The US, unlike Canada, has not really gone public in a big way about its allegations against India. In fact, the Biden administration didn't really say much at all until an indictment was unsealed last year, which laid out in considerable detail what I would describe as evidence to back up the US allegations. But of course, in Canada, it's been very different, as we've discussed, that the Canadian government has been very public from a very early point about its allegations without providing evidence in the public sphere. But I don't think the US
what's your best guess for why he did that? Your best guess is this was just Trudeau going out on a limb?
Well, I mean, I think that the official position from Canada, which I would think would have some truth to it, is that it was really about public security. I think that the Canadian government was concerned that if it didn't go public with these allegations when it did, then it risked threats to Canadian lives. Essentially, the Canadian government hoped that by bringing out these allegations publicly, that it could disrupt possible future activities or threats to members of the Sikh community, Canadian citizens. I think that's part of it. There's various possibilities, but I do think that public security issue is something that should not be dismissed in this discussion.
So very quickly, how do you see this playing out over the next, let's say, till between now and whenever the next US president takes office?
Right. I mean, it's hard to know what the next administration would do, but I think that the goal would be the same. That there's bipartisan support in the U.S., regardless of who wins the election, that Canada is a key ally and India is a key strategic partner. So I think that the U.S., regardless of who wins the election, will continue to balance that critical partnership, critical alliance with Canada, help it express solidarity, but also be very careful about how it engages with India regarding its own allegations against India. So I expect that we'll see continuity.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much to all our guests. We need to go to a special interview right after this. Thank you. All right, I want to go across now to Mr. Ward Elcock. He's the former director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and former Deputy Minister for National Defence. Thank you very much, Mr. Elcock. Yesterday, the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, testifying before the Foreign Election Interference Commission, said that when he spoke in September of 2023, for the first time, he made the public allegations against the Government of India and Government of India officials being involved in the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Yesterday, he qualified that by saying, at that time, it was not hard evidentiary proof, it was simply intel. Do you think, in light of what he said yesterday, he jumped the gun back in September 2023?
No, not at all. Frankly, the intelligence seemed pretty firm, and intelligence does allow governments to take decisions, even if sometimes it is not absolutely perfect.
But wouldn't you make the case that if particularly you go public, and it's not just anyone who's going public, it's the Prime Minister of a country going public from the floor of the Parliament of that country, it has to have some evidentiary basis or some value as hard proof?
Depends on how good your intelligence is. If you have very solid intelligence, and in this case they appear to have believed that they did, and it seems to have been borne out, given the fact that the RCMP have now actually leveled charges on the basis of some of that original information, I think the government's actions are borne out as being entirely appropriate.
Why would Trudeau then qualify that by saying what he said yesterday, that at that time it did not have hard evidentiary value, it was just intel?
At the time they said it was intelligence. At the time they didn't say it was evidence. They said it was intelligence.
What has changed now?
That hasn't changed.
Yeah, exactly. That hasn't changed because, and it hasn't changed in the last 1 year either, because the Government of India even today is saying that in the last 1 year, they have not got any proof from the Canadian side.
Well, the Government of India is saying that it doesn't have any proof. There was a meeting in Singapore at which some evidence was offered to the Government of India. That doesn't appear to be sufficient for the Government of India. However, the RCMP is now embarked on 20 or 30 charges. So there will, in fact, be prosecutions, and there will, in fact, be evidence brought forward, some of which will almost certainly suggest that there were links with Indian diplomats in Canada.
Let's talk about the Niger killing. The 4 individuals have been arrested in connection with that. The trial has not even started. No documents have been produced in court, which, as you say, would be evidence, and that evidence should be sufficient enough to stand in a court of law. The trial's not even begun. It's been over a year since Mr. Trudeau made those allegations. So why, if the Canadians have the evidence, is it not being produced in a court of law?
That's not the way it works in our system until they have actually a court date for the actual prosecution for the actual court case. The RCMP is not going to provide the evidence to the public. It will only be provided in the course of the trial itself. So until the trial actually starts, we won't see any of the evidence. Once the trial is started, we will begin to see evidence on a regular basis, I suspect. And particularly if one of the defendants or some of the defendants in that case or other cases flip, then we will probably get more evidence.
But since May of this year, Mr. Elcock, this case has been adjourned 5 times. 4 out of those 5 times, it was the Crown Prosecution Services who asked for the adjournment. If they have the evidence, why are they asking for adjournments?
That's neither here nor there, but that's not unusual in a criminal prosecution. May relate to the fact that they are still looking for more evidence, or that they are collecting more evidence, or they have more evidence available, or have to interview additional witnesses. It can indicate a number of things.
One of the things
but it's not unusual.
One of the things that the government of India has repeatedly stressed is, if there is the evidence, it's not been produced in a court of law, and the government of India, as you said, is unwilling to investigate this, why not make that public?
Because that's not the way trials work. They may work that way in India, but in Canada, they don't work that way. The evidence is produced at trial. To produce the evidence before the trial would endanger a conviction at the trial.
But it's okay for the Prime Minister of a country to stand up in Parliament and make allegations, very serious allegations, against a fellow democracy.
The reason... Pardon me, he originally stood up on the basis of intelligence. The comments that he's made since then basically are around the decision of the RCMP, not only to indicate that it is proceeding with charges, but also to proceed to, if you will, cut off the head of the snake, so to speak, and because the Indian government had refused to allow its diplomats to be interrogated, had refused to waive diplomatic immunity, the RCMP had moved to make public the information in order to reduce the threat to a number of Canadians. The RCMP and other police forces have already warned somewhere in the region of 11 or 12, 13 Canadians about threats to the security of their lives as a consequence of the investigations that the RCMPs have carried out.
But Mr. Elcock, you seriously think that the Canadian police, if they had evidence, not intel, but evidence that can stand test in a court of law, which directly links diplomats, not just folks of the secret services or not folks of the intelligence services, but diplomats to this kind of espionage that the RCMP is talking about, that wouldn't have been made public or produced in a court of law already?
The Crown Prosecutor is not going to launch a prosecution or lay charges without sufficient evidence that that's the case. But, and in this case, the Crown Prosecutor, they have proceeded with charges. The trial has not yet gone ahead. I can see the point, but that's neither here nor there. Trials don't necessarily go ahead immediately. This is going to be a complicated trial. It's going to take a fair while. It's got 4 defendants. There may be others as well. So it's going to be complex. So those things don't proceed overnight.
But that is the basis on which both countries have been expelling each other's diplomats.
The Canadian government expelled the Indian diplomats on the basis that the Indian government had refused to waive their diplomatic immunity. Given the evidence that I assume the government had at that time, the government had no choice, the Indian government having refused to waive immunity, but to expel the diplomats. They were no longer acceptable in Canada.
Well, that was because the said Indian diplomats were being added by the Canadian police as persons of interest in a murder investigation. Why would any country agree to that?
Persons of interest can cover a multitude of sins. If they had enough information that they wanted to talk to them, whether they have enough information to provide clear links in the trial, time will tell. But they clearly had enough information to want to talk to the individuals in question. The fact that the Indian government refused to waive diplomatic immunity and allow the RCMP to talk to the individuals made it inevitable that they would be expelled.
All right, final question. Let me turn the tables and ask you, if Canadian diplomats were accused here in India of, let's say, being persons of interest in a murder investigation, and the Indian government asked the Canadian government to waive off their diplomatic immunity, you think they would do that?
I haven't the foggiest idea. I don't know. There would be a lot of pressure on the Canadian government to allow it if there were any indication that a Canadian had been involved. So it's impossible to tell ahead of time. But it is a hypothetical question that who knows.
All right, Mr. Ward Elcock.
Depends on the circumstances.
Mr. Ward Elcock, the head of the former head of Canadian Intelligence Services. Thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 18. All right, we'll take a quick break here on the program. On the other side, another big international development. The IDF is in the process of confirming that Yahya Sinwar, the head of the dreaded terrorist organization Hamas, is likely killed in an Israeli strike this morning. If it is true, then what are the implications? Because this could have far and wide-reaching consequences, not just for the ongoing war, but in the wider region, that is the Middle East. Quick break. We will be joined by an expert view right on the other side of this quick break.
At L'Oréal Group.
Well, as the India-Canada ties continue to take a serious hit, Charanjit Singh Channi of the Congress has now made a statement and said, and I'm going to quote him here, that India and Canada enjoy very good relations. People from Punjab are living in Canada in a very large number. We enjoy good people-to-people ties also, so we should not spoil the relationship with Canada. Our government should take steps to improve the bilateral ties. Agencies are involved in the rise of gangsters. In fact, he has touched upon the murder of Sidhu Moosewala and has went on to say that the murder of Sidhu Moosewala was completely political. We'll bring you more details with regards to the word and suggestion coming in from Indian National Congress and former Chief Minister of the state, Charanjit Singh Channi. But at this point of time, he has made some serious statements. He has said that India and Canada do enjoy very good relations, and a large number of people, the Indian community, do reside in Canada, specifically from Punjab. So we should go on and solve the issue at first, because we enjoy good people-to-people ties with Canada. We should not spoil the relationship going on with the Canada. Our government should also take steps to improve the bilateral ties between the two nations. In fact, he has said that agencies are involved in the rise of gangsters, and the murder of Sidhu Moosewala is completely political. Let's listen into what exactly, Congress's member Charanjit Singh Channi.
ਸਾਡਾ 9 ਮਾਸ ਦਾ ਰਿਸ਼ਤਾ ਬਣ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ। ਸਾਡਾ ਹਰ ਦੂਸਰਾ ਚੌਥਾ ਘਰ ਸਾਡਾ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਮੁੰਡਾ ਕੁੜੀ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਉੱਥੇ ਬੈਠਾ ਹੈ। ਸਾਡੇ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਹੈ, ਸਾਡਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਉੱਥੇ ਹੈ ਹਰ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ। ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਿਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹ ਖਰਾਬ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ। ਸਾਡੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਰਿਸ਼ਤਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਧਾਰੇ। ਸਾਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਰੋਜ਼ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਹੁਣ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਪ੍ਰਵਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਲੋਕ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਹੈ ਉੱਥੇ ਵੱਜ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਹੈ।
ਇੱਕ ਗੈਂਗਸਟਰ ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ?
ਗੈਂਗਸਟਰ ਫਿਰ ਪੈਦਾ ਕੌਣ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ? ਇਹ ਨਾ ਪੈਦਾ ਕਰਨ। ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਬਿੱਲੀ ਥੈਲੇ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਕਲੀਅਰ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਏਜੰਸੀਆਂ ਦਾ ਇਨਵੋਲਵਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ। ਇੱਥੇ ਤੱਕ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਮੂਸੇਵਾਲ ਦਾ ਕਤਲ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਰਾਜਨੀਤਿਕ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਥੋੜੇ ਦਿਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਹੋਰ ਅੱਗੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਸਮਝ ਆ।
CNN News 18 Senior Editor Pallavi Ghosh is joining us on the phone line. Pallavi, a very good morning to you. This is a very serious statement that Charanjit Singh Channi has made. First of all, he has also said that, Sidhu Moosewala's murder was extremely political and you will get to know about it later in the days to come, of course. And he has spoken about how maximum number of Punjabi people are residing there in Canada. So Indian government should solve the issue at first.
Well, he's of course speaking from his constituency of Punjab. I mean, he's of course a member of parliament out there, and he's been chief minister of the state. See, not just lots of Sikhs who are settled in Canada. Likewise, a lot of money comes into Punjab by way of earnings of Indians who have settled down in Canada. If you go through Punjab, you will notice actually almost every third to fourth house has one person who's an NRI settled in Canada. So the contribution of the earnings of the state also comes in from a large number of Sikhs settled in Canada, and that is the reason why he's voicing this concern that if India-Canada relations and trade ties and employment gets further derailed, it's going to start hurting the people of Punjab, and especially those young people who may have settled in Canada to make their earning. And that's the stand which he has taken, very much in sync with that of the Congress party largely, but this is precisely the point which is likely to stoke a lot of controversy. India has taken a tough stand against Canada, saying that they are needlessly blaming India and also meddling in our internal affairs. When a member of parliament stands up and says that we need to improve relationships with Canada, it of course throws up a lot of contradictions. It also throws up a lot of controversy, where the BJP is certainly going to ask this question, is that where are your loyalties lying? Is it with India or is it with Canada?
And since you have spoken about contradiction, Pallavi, please stay on with us. We have another statement coming in, this time around from Jairam Ramesh of Congress. He has also made a statement. He posted on his social media profile X, and I'm going to quote a couple of lines from that tweet here, that the Indian National Congress has already asked the Prime Minister to take the leaders of opposition in both the Houses of Parliament and other political leaders into confidence on the serious charges levelled against the government of India by the USA and Canada. Allegations made by Canada are tarnishing India's global reputation and damaging brand India. Pallavi continues to stay on with us on the broadcast. Pallavi, we heard from Charanjit Singh Channi. He is asking to sit down and have a talk with Canada, but at the same time, Jairam Ramesh is saying that, take all the members of the opposition also into confidence. And let's talk about how India's brand is being damaged internationally.
Yes, absolutely. So this again is going to stoke controversy, where the BJP is certainly going to accuse the Congress party always siding with those who are not helping or those who are against the cause of India. Indian stand has been, as I was just pointing out, that there has been a consistent allegations on our country from Canada, from Justin Trudeau, and also meddling into our internal affairs. Now, when Jairam Ramesh is talking about all-party meeting, nothing wrong with that. I guess the government will take a call on that. But when he says that, relations between India and Canada has been spoiled, he's also raising a question mark over the foreign policy of the central government. That is something which may not be appreciated by the central government, saying that when we are talking tough with Canada, why is it that you're speaking a language which is only going to end up emboldening them?
Right, Pallavi. Thank you so much for putting all of that into perspective for our viewers. We will keep coming back to you for more details on the political developments happening in the Indian scenario. But right now, let's shift focus. Another breaking news now coming in, this time around from the US. Well, the Biden administration on Thursday has appreciated India's efforts and cooperation in the ongoing investigation of the assassination plot of an quote-unquote American citizen in the US. Well, US State Department...
So Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza is now well over a year, and now it has opened up multiple fronts, including one in the north vis-a-vis Hezbollah. And of course, there is now fear of a direct retaliation between Israel and Iran for the ballistic missile attacks that happened a few days ago. But now, just in the past hour, we've got fresh details, fresh news coming through. The IDF has put out a tweet saying that 3 terrorists were eliminated in southern Gaza this morning. They're trying to identify all 3 of them. One of them could potentially be Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas. Now, the IDF, if and when they confirm that this is indeed one of the 3 terrorists who was eliminated this morning, is Yahya Sinwar, then that is a huge deal. That will be a body blow to Hamas. This comes on the back of the killing of Mohammed Deif, one of the Hamas commanders, said to be the mastermind behind the October 7th attack, and also after the killing of the political head of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, in Tehran some months ago. What may this mean? Not just to the body blows that it has landed on Hamas, but more importantly, what may this mean to the future trajectory of this war, which Israel started on the 7th of October, right after the attacks by Hamas. Let me go across to Mr. Nathan Sachs. He is the head of the Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institution. Thank you very much, Mr. Sachs, for joining us. Let me start off by asking you about this new development, the latest one, which has just broken in this past hour. And at the time of this broadcast, the IDF has just put out this tweet saying that they are in the process of confirming whether one of the 3 terrorists eliminated this morning is Yahya Sinwar. What do you make of it? And if it indeed is, how big a deal would it be?
So we don't know, of course, if it is. We don't have final confirmation. If it is, it would be a huge success for the IDF. He has been target number 1 in this war. He's a man with thousands of people, the blood of thousands on his hands, Israelis, but of course tens of thousands of Gazans who have died in the war that he started on the morning of October 7th. He was the main mastermind, together with Mohammed Deif, as you mentioned, and the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, now also nominally the political leader of Hamas in general. The main man behind this whole war, this whole horrific year, is Yahya Sinwar. If he is dead, it is a modicum of justice, but it would also open the possibilities for this war finally to wind down and bringing some solace to the people in Gaza, in Israel, and elsewhere. If it is true, it is momentous, and it could turn a real page in this war.
Like I said, we're still waiting for final confirmation from the IDF. But this does come on the back of the killing of Mohammed Deif, the military commander who was widely believed to be the one who orchestrated the October 7th attacks, and the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, the political head of Hamas in Tehran while he was there for the inauguration of the new Iranian president. So would it be fair to say that the top leadership of Hamas would be eliminated if the Sinwar news is confirmed?
Yes, absolutely. And Sinwar was the main man behind all decisions recently. We saw Haniyeh, nominally the political head who lived in a lavish life in Doha. He would convey Hamas decisions, but the decision-making was all done by Sinwar himself. Sinwar was close to Mohammed Deif, who had been the military commander, the commander of the military wing, the Qassam brigades of Hamas inside Gaza. But it was Sinwar who in recent years had led Hamas, decided the tone, and he is the one who decided on October 7th and pulling the trigger there, possibly surprising some of the members of the leadership of Hamas. If he is indeed gone, then an important part of the leadership, certainly the most senior man in Hamas, will be removed from the scene. There are still other leaders. There are others who live especially abroad. But it would be a major blow, of course, of Hamas, which is already in shambles and alongside the Gaza Strip, which it governed for years and is now brought to complete ruin under Israeli fire.
You did say a moment ago that this could potentially pave the way for Israel finally sort of moving in the direction of culminating this war. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, so major military operations in the Gaza Strip by Israel have already ended. The problem is that no alternative has been put in place to Hamas. So Israel is now focused on the core of the axis that's fighting it, which is Iran, and especially its more stronger proxy, Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hamas, the weaker proxy in a sense, really not a proxy, but an ally of Iran, a loose ally, had already been defeated to a large degree. The problem in Gaza right now is a vacuum of power. So Hamas has been degraded dramatically, but nothing else has been put in place. So the big question is, can there be something put in place? Could negotiations for a ceasefire and hostage deal be resuscitated? There are still 101 unaccounted for Israelis who are held hostages, either dead or alive, by Hamas. And that is a very important political issue inside Israel. A deal, if there was some replacement to Sinwar who could negotiate this, a deal that would allow for their release and a ceasefire in Gaza that would permit reconstruction in Gaza, massive aid to enter the Gaza Strip, that would be a very welcome development. I think the killing of Sinwar, if indeed he is dead, would help it dramatically. If he is not, we may be into for many more months of this.
So then the question is, as you alluded just a moment ago, who or what replaces this vacuum? Who would be the most acceptable person for Israel if indeed this is confirmed and we need to move in the direction of a ceasefire? Who may be the person or persons who Israel would find most accessible to do, or amenable, if I can use that word, to do business with, to move in the direction of a ceasefire?
So there's two real questions in there. It's a very good question, and as we should unpack it into two parts. The first is who could negotiate for Hamas on a ceasefire? And if it's not Sinwar, then Hamas, which is quite a black box, would likely appoint someone else de facto or officially to speak for them and to make the decisions. It's a rather opaque organization, and Israel has absolutely no say on what happens inside there. Who governs the Gaza Strip, at least from a civilian perspective? Who might begin the enormous task of reconstruction there? That is a second question, and there it is someone who would need to be acceptable to quite a few parties that disagree on a lot. It would likely need to be someone of the secular Palestinian camp, in other words, opposed to Hamas, but perhaps not tied directly to the Palestinian Authority, which has lost a lot of legitimacy among Palestinians themselves. It would need to be someone who could work with the Israelis, but also someone who could likely work with the Gulf countries, such as the UAE, where a lot of the funds will have to come from. The task of rebuilding the Gaza Strip will be enormous and enormously expensive, and the likely source, the only ones who could really do it on a ready basis, would be the Gulf countries if they were satisfied that there were the political conditions met for them. And of course, behind all of those, there is also the United States and remnants of Hamas, who will continue to fight and probably try to undermine this process, egged on by Iran, who will continue its fight and has absolutely no interest in seeing a secular Palestinian rebuilding of the Gaza Strip out of the rubble that it is right now. Iran has been working very hard at this for decades, as we've seen in Lebanon and in the Gaza Strip, and more recently in the West Bank. They will not stop, and that is part of why the challenge is so enormous.
So I wanted to widen it to the Iran question, because that is the question that's top of mind for everyone, which is that it's not just a case of if Israel will retaliate for the ballistic missile attack that Iran carried out on cities like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem a few weeks ago. It's a question of when. And we're given to understand we could see a response as early as in the next few days. What may the nature of that response be?
So, of course, we don't know precisely, and there's a lot of disinformation going around, but there have been very intensive discussions between the United States and Israel on just this point. The administration in Washington is very wary of an extensive Israeli attack, either on oil facilities and economic facilities inside Iran, or on the nuclear sites in Iran, on the nuclear program, which has been advancing dramatically in recent months and years. More likely, we would see in the short term an attack on military installations. That does not mean it's a mild attack. It may be a widespread attack. We have here a negotiation through fire between Israel and Iran. Until April of this year, April 13th, Iran had never attacked Israel directly. It had always fought via Lebanese and Palestinians. Now that it has fought directly, Israel is struggling to bring back the old rules of the game where Iran dare not attack Israel directly, and Iran is very keen to establish a new equation where it can attack Israel directly with semi-impunity.
So then the question is, the nature of the response from Israel needs to be heavy enough, painful enough to be seen as retaliatory for what happened a few Tuesdays ago, and at the same time that it doesn't push Iran into a corner where it has no chance but to escalate further.
Exactly, and so there's a very difficult and extremely dangerous needle to thread. The attempt would be to deter Iran from firing again and push it back into the old rules of the game in a sense, but at the same time avoid a situation where they truly feel their back is against the wall and they have nothing to lose and simply fire everything they can. That is a very difficult needle to thread, as I said, and also a very risky one. We are not far from full-scale escalation. We've been close to that for many weeks and months, but it is now extremely dicey. But just to make clear, a no response would leave us in the same situation. We would still have Iran operating via proxies and trying to foment what it sees as the destruction of Israel, very, very explicitly. And therefore, at some point, Israeli responses and going back to it. So the question is, can a modus vivendi be reached where the retaliation deters but fails to bring about full-scale escalation?
All right. Nathan Sachs from the Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institution. Thank you very much for your time, your thoughts and perspective. Thank you. The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi arrived in Saudi Arabia this week as part of a diplomatic tour aimed at shoring up ties with Iran's Arab neighbors. Earlier, he had gone to both Beirut and Damascus, meeting with the leaders of Lebanon and Syria, and all of this as anticipation builds for Israel's potential retaliation against Iran for the recent ballistic missile strikes. In Riyadh, the Saudi capital, Araghchi met with the Saudi Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan as well as the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. After meeting the Saudi leadership, this is what he said, and I quote, "I hope that these consultations can lead to better conditions for Palestine and Lebanon and establish peace in the region." The visit by Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, to Saudi Arabia showcased a more neutral approach to the region's troubles amongst Gulf Arab countries. Remember, countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain are some of which are America's closest partners in the Middle East, and all of them have expressed growing concern over Israel's relentless aggression in the Gaza Strip, and now increasingly against southern Lebanon. What does the visit of the Iranian foreign minister to these Gulf Arab countries signify? Can Tehran and Riyadh bury the hatchet with the common cause being Israel's increasing aggression, not just in Gaza, but also in Lebanon? And what may all of this mean for Israel's potential retaliation against Iran? Saudi Arabia and Iran have had a long history of bitter rivalry, but they reached a new agreement in March 2023 which reduced tensions in the Persian Gulf. It also opened the door to high-level diplomatic contacts, including the meetings that we saw this week in Riyadh. The ongoing war in Gaza has further complicated the dynamics between Iran and Saudi Arabia. As Israel intensifies its military operations against Hamas, both countries have expressed solidarity with the Palestinian cause. This shared interest has provided a platform for cooperation as both countries are advocating openly now for an independent Palestinian state. This is a goal that resonates deeply both in Iran and in Saudi Arabia. It plays well within their respective domestic political constituencies. Iran has historically positioned itself as a champion of the Palestinian state. In fact, it has provided outright support to groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has also emphasized its commitment to Palestinian statehood as part of its broader Arab identity. The current conflict offers both Iran and Saudi Arabia an opportunity to align their foreign policies more closely against Israel's actions. What has brought them together, that's Riyadh and Tehran, is also Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's utter disregard for a two-state solution. He has not only opened new fronts against Hezbollah and against Hamas, he's also opened potentially a direct line of attack against Tehran. The pummeling of Gaza has also continued non-stop, leaving casualties upwards of 40,000. He has stopped saying publicly that he believes in the two-state solution as a final solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. This has given fertile ground to both Saudi Arabia and Iran to find common cause. Both Iran and Saudi Arabia share a profound discontent with Netanyahu's administration for the hardline stand he's taken against Palestinians. But more importantly, they're also miffed with the Israeli government's reluctance to engage in any serious fashion to try and find a ceasefire in Gaza. For the last year since the war began, the United States, along with its Arab partners like Egypt and Qatar, have been trying, very unsuccessfully, for a ceasefire that would put a halt to the hostilities. The Israeli government's approach has been characterized by expansionist policies both in the West Bank and in Gaza, and a lack of a genuine effort towards establishing a viable Palestinian state. This situation has galvanized both Tehran and Riyadh. In fact, they're voicing their opposition much more aggressively. They're framing their diplomatic engagement between Riyadh and Tehran as part of a broader struggle for Palestinian rights. The alignment on this issue is very significant because it highlights not just regional adversaries and how they can find common ground, but also underscores potentially the collaborative efforts that they can make towards bringing these two traditional rivals together. As both nations navigate their historical animosities, their mutual support for Palestine could be a catalyst for deeper cooperation. Iran's ISNA news agency also reported that Abbas Araghchi, his regional tour, it sought to end Israeli crimes in both Gaza and Lebanon, Aragachi also met with top Lebanese officials in Beirut on Friday and also with President Bashar al-Assad of Syria in Damascus on Saturday. Iran and Saudi Arabia have been embroiled in a bitter rivalry since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, after which Iran was established as a Shiite power, and that was in stark opposition to the Sunni majority Saudi Arabia. The relationship deteriorated over time, and particularly after the execution of the Shia cleric Nimr al-Nimr by Saudi Arabia in 2016. That episode, that execution, led to the complete severance of diplomatic ties between Riyadh and Tehran. However, a breakthrough occurred in March of 2023 when China brokered an agreement to restore diplomatic ties. This thaw has allowed for renewed dialogue and cooperation on various issues, including regional security and economic collaboration. The background of this new detente is essential to understand the significance of this. Both nations, that's Iran and Saudi Arabia, have long sought to exert their influence over the Middle East, often through proxy conflicts, whether it's in Yemen or in Syria or now increasingly in Iraq. However, the changing geopolitical landscape, which is marked by an American withdrawal from the region and also by increased Chinese involvement, has prompted both Riyadh and Tehran to come together. China's involvement in brokering the recent rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia cannot be overstated. Beijing's strategic interests in the region, primarily centered around energy security, have driven it to play a more active role in the Middle East. So by facilitating dialogue between these two rival powers, Iran and Saudi Arabia, China is hoping to stabilize this region, which is crucial for China's own energy imports. China imports more than 5 million barrels of oil every single day from the Middle East, and more than half of that is through oil imports from the Gulf region. The agreement reached in March 2023 was not merely about restoring diplomatic ties, it also represented China's growing clout in international affairs, also its ability to navigate what is a complex geopolitical landscape. The successful mediation showcases China's potential as an alternative partner for Middle Eastern countries outside of their over-reliance on America. The thawing of ties between Iran and Saudi Arabia holds significant implications for the broader Middle East. As these two countries work towards rebuilding trust and cooperation, they may also help reshape traditional alliances and traditional rivalries across the region. Their joint stand on the Palestinian statehood issue could embolden other Arab countries to reassess their relationship. In fact, this rapprochement may also influence how regional conflicts in that Middle East region are managed moving forward, with both countries advocating for dialogue rather than any form of direct military confrontation. There is potential for reduced tensions in places like Yemen, Syria, even Iraq, where they have previously supported opposing sides. So it looks like it's time for a major reset in the Middle East involving the Shia-Sunni fault line.
Kenny Chiu, former MP from British Columbia, joins us live. Mr. Chiu has also deposed before Canada's Federal Inquiry Committee against China's alleged election intervention. Mr. Chiu, thank you so much for joining in on CNN News 18. Now, as somebody who has been an alleged target of a Chinese disinformation campaign, one that was aimed to dissuade Chinese Canadians from voting for you, you're also someone who lost his seat in the 2021 election because of alleged foreign intervention from China. What's your assessment of Prime Minister Trudeau's testimony on foreign intervention?
I think the Prime Minister is famous in obfuscating, issues and also conditions, and also he's actually quite infamous in offloading responsibility as well. To understand what I said, all one has to do is to look back on the past 3 years since the last election, 2021, when the allegations of foreign interference and political interference electorally has been reported. And the initial response from Justin Trudeau, the Liberal leader, and his government has been nothing but denial. And their accusation at the time is that the Conservatives, particularly the leader of the Conservatives, Aaron O'Toole have been nothing but just a sore loser. And, denial, and denial, when that is not satisfying, when even the national security intelligence apparatus in Canada could not tolerate the government continue to sweep all these intelligence reports that they have provided under the rug, they had to decide people in the national security apparatus decided to take the unimaginable step of being a whistleblower. And they have exposed many of the reports that they have warned the government, the intelligence that they have provided to the government, and how the government had decided to not act and protect Canada.
Right.
And based on all that, finally, the government of Justin Trudeau had decided to succumb to the pressure. But instead of doing a public inquiry, digging to the bottom of this and see how wide and how far for an interference get, Justin Trudeau had decided to hide behind this special rapporteur.
Kenny, going by Mr. Trudeau's deposition at the Commission of Inquiry, he has only confirmed the Indian position that the Canadian government has only provided intelligence, not hard evidentiary proof. Now that the panel probing foreign interference in Canada's elections of 2019, even 2021, has found China to be the biggest threat, many foreign policy experts believe that Justin Trudeau is using the Niger killing case to project India as the fall guy and save China. I'd like your thoughts.
Well, before I begin, one has to allow me to stake out that as a Canadian, our government, I believe our government has a highest priority of a government is to protect its people and protect its country. And therefore, allegedly, if something similar to what was reported had happened, that a foreign country had decided to conduct operations in Canada in even assassinating our Canadian citizens. This is something that a national government must not tolerate and has to respond with strength. And this is what I think all Canadians are agreeing. It doesn't matter whether it's Justin Trudeau, Liberal government, or the Conservative government. I think we all agree that a national government's primary objective is to protect Canada and its people. Now, having said that, Justin Trudeau's inconsistent treatment of the Chinese interference file, comparing with what the alleged Indian assassination attempt in Canada, had actually brought up a lot of people's good questions or questions and curiosity.
Kenny Chu, come 2025, I do hope that Canada is able to have a free and fair election. Many thanks to you for joining in.
Viewers, Justin Trudeau is not just a weak-willed, immature, pretty puppet Prime Minister being used as a front by India's enemies, but he's also a bad Canadian. A politician so desperate that he's severely embarrassed his own country. Before you accuse me of losing my objectivity, let me tell you that these adjectives I've just used have been used by his political opponents, by mainstream analysts in Canada to describe him after he has failed to come up with the goods. Nevertheless, what I can say with some measure of certainty is that Trudeau has only himself to blame. That's because Justin Trudeau has gambled his nation's credibility by making a baseless allegation against India, a responsibly rule-abiding, democratic, emerging power that has been